Welcome back to Adventures with Dice. I'm Rob and I'm your host for these videos. And today we are going to be looking at OSR versus Basic Fantasy. But before we get into that, if you like the kind of videos that I'm putting out and you like this content, there are some things you can do to help me help this channel grow. The number one and most important thing that you can do is watch the video and like it. Likes help a lot. Secondly, if you would like to get early access to my videos and some of the other content, the cards and maps and stuff that I do, you can join the channel, become a hero of Adventures with Dice. There's a link in the description and on the channel itself. And for $1 a month, you get early access to my videos and all the stuff that I put up. There's also a link in the description for the Amazon wish list if you'd like to do a one-time purchase to help the channel out. And aside from that, you can also share the video, share it with social media, share it with your friends, your family, your church, everywhere, really. But let's jump right into OSR versus Basic Fantasy. Now, I have done several of these versus videos before, and they are always really popular. And if you've watched any of my versus videos, you know that I don't tend to trash one game over the other, and it's usually two games that I like or love, and I spend the video going through and explaining the differences between the two games. And mainly that I do that because it may help somebody out there who's trying to decide which game they want to purchase. So that's what we're going to be doing today, because I love both of these games. They're both great games in their own right, but I am going to be explaining the differences between the two games, and we're going to take a look at what one has or offers over the other. In doing that, I need to be clear about something from the beginning. So I will be using this version, the first version of Old Swords Reigns, or technically second version, I guess, and third edition of Basic Fantasy. Now, there is a new edition of Basic Fantasy out of fourth edition, and there is a new edition of Old Swords Reign that is in the works to come out soonish, I think. But I'm using these two for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're still available. Number two, they're the ones I have. I honestly didn't see any point in picking up 4th edition Basic Fantasy because I already have a stack of Basic Fantasy books this high. And it all works together anyway. The main reason for the new edition of Basic Fantasy and Old Swords Reign, if you don't know, goes back to earlier this year with the OGL debacle and WotC doing what they do best, and that's shooting themselves in the foot with a Gatling gun. So tons of third-party creators that used the OGL before are switching to different Creative Commons license to move away from the OGL. So they're having to slightly rewrite parts of their books so that they don't have to use the OGL. So both of these are going through that, but I'm looking at these two editions, which are both compatible with the new editions that are coming out. It's really just errata, cleaning things up, and the wording of some spells for the most part. Both of these you can still get on Amazon, and there's the new edition of Old Swords Reign will also be available on Amazon when it comes out. Now, to keep the comparison pretty fair, I'm only going to be looking at the core book. Basic Fantasy has a ton of different adventure books and supplement books that are already out for the game, and that kind of makes the comparison lopsided if I use that. Which, if you play Basic Fantasy, you already know that all of that stuff is there. So we're just going to be looking at the core book versus the core book and what the two of them offer. So, like I said, they're both moving away from the OGL. They're both going under a new Creative Commons license to avoid any more entanglements with WotC. Both versions of the game are available for free on their website, basicfantasy.org. You can get all of their stuff for free. Old Swords Reign is on osreign.com. They have, Damien has put up the main book and the player's book and character sheet for free download if you want to get it off of there. If you want to purchase them, let's look at the price difference. Both come in softcover and hardcover for varying prices. The paperback version of OSR is $7. The paperback version of Basic Fantasy is $7.50, so 50-cent difference. The hardcover version of OSR is $15 on Amazon, and the hardcover version of Basic Fantasy 3rd edition is $15.25, so a quarter difference. So they're pretty close there. Or like I said, you can download the PDFs for free. One of the biggest differences between the two, keep in mind that both games are trying to emulate old school role-playing, but they do it two different ways. Old Swords Reign does it with mostly theme and a few new tweaks to mechanics that kind of gives you the feel of old school, and it uses newer 5th ed mechanics but makes it a bit deadlier. Whereas Basic Fantasy uses mostly older mechanics. Both of them use ascending AC, but you'll find the different subsystems in Basic Fantasy for like thief skills and things like that, whereas Old Swords Reign uses the one course rule of D20 add a modifier, beat a DC all the way through the game. So they both approach old school play from a slightly different angle. Both are very enjoyable. I would run both games. I currently do run just OSR, and it's because my players are having so much fun with it and I'm having so much fun with it. It's just my game of choice. I still love Basic Fantasy. Basic Fantasy introduced me to the OSR. I didn't know it existed until I found Basic Fantasy, and to this day I would still run Basic Fantasy if I have players that want to play it. And I still use, we were talking about this in our weekly game this week, I would still use like the equipment book. I would still pull monsters from here if I needed to. And adventures. There's tons and tons of adventures that Damien has shown on his channel. It's super easy to convert those adventures over on the fly and use them with OSR. Both games are deadly. I do think that Basic Fantasy is slightly deadlier. You have a little better chance in OSR of surviving and getting out of it alive than you do in Basic Fantasy. Basic Fantasy still holds to those old tropes where certain monster attacks, if you get hit, it's save or die, that kind of thing. Now there's obviously house rules for that, but I'm just going based off of the rules as written. So they both contain 4 races and 4 classes, which is your base for old school D&D. And that is the human, the halfling, the dwarf, and the elf. And that's pretty much it. You also have your 4 classes, your your cleric, your fighter, your thief, the wizard or magic user. You have those across both books too, so they're pretty much equal in that aspect. There's not a whole lot of expansion in Basic Fantasy from that point. Like, those are just your 4 classes, your 4 races, and that's it. Yes, they have lots of stuff on their website that you can download and expand on that, but I'm going just off of the core book. While Old Swords Reign does contain the 4 core races and 4 core classes, It also implements things that are not in Basic Fantasy, like the character backgrounds, feats, and hindrances. And when combined with the 4 core races and classes, you have a massive amount of character options, more than you have in anything WotC's put out, to be honest with you. Now I realize it, people can say, well, you don't have as many races. True, you don't have as many races as the new stuff. However, as I'm going to be showing in one of my upcoming videos on house rules, it's very easy to translate those races over. But again, going just off the core book, there are almost unlimited concepts for characters in this book once you add in the backgrounds, feats, and hindrances that you don't have in this one. Alright, now, level caps. OSR caps out at level 12. You are not superheroes. You are not superheroes in this either, but Basic Fantasy does go to level 20. That's kind of a neither here nor there thing. It's really up to you and your group. In my experience, I would say that most groups never start at level 1 and play all the way to 20. I'm not saying it can't happen or it hasn't happened. I'm saying that in general, it doesn't happen. Usually the game peters out, or you find something else to do, or the characters die, or whatever. But most games don't go that high. I think that the sweet spot of 12 in Old Swords Reign is really, really good, but if you want to extend beyond that, Basic Fantasy does go up to 20. Alright, so what do they offer spell-wise? I was actually surprised when I did the count on this. So, in Old Swords Reign, you have 36 cleric spells and 95 wizard spells, coming in at 131 total. In Basic Fantasy, you have 48 cleric spells and 68 wizard spells, coming in at 116. So you actually have more spells in OSR than you do in Basic Fantasy, core book to core book. Monsters. What do they offer in a case of monsters? Again, we're not looking at the field guides that Basic Fantasy puts out. We're just looking at what's in the core book. OSR is going to fall short here. It has 123 monsters versus Basic Fantasy's 181, I believe. There's like a difference of 58 more monsters in Basic Fantasy's core book. Both of them have rules for treasure. Both of them have rules for magic items, cursed items, dungeon and wilderness exploration. Though I will say the wilderness exploration and hex crawling rules in OSR are far superior to what you get in Basic Fantasy, in my opinion. However, at the end of the day, I think they are both fantastic games. They have provided me and my friends countless hours of fun for a couple of years now. So if you're on the fence about which one of these to pick up, I hope that this video helps you kind of decide, which one you want. But honestly, they're so easily interchangeable, I would pick up both. You never know. You might try the old school way of playing mechanically and really like it, or you may want to stay with just an old school theme and play with more modern mechanics. Either way, there are tons and tons of adventures for Basic Fantasy that you can use with Old Swords Reign. You can also, if you find that there's just a few things in Old Swords Reign that you really like, you can plug and play and pull those over to Basic Fantasy if you want to. It's your game. It's really up to you. As I've said before, the RPG police aren't coming around to your house. Hopefully. If they do, delete these videos from your watch history. So that's pretty much it. That's how I do my versus videos. I kind of look at the differences between the two. I would be hard pressed to just, like, I have not been running Basic Fantasy or playing Basic Fantasy, and I did, put stuff away, but I've since pulled it back out. And Like I said, there's tons of adventures that I will use out of it, and I'm going to be using it with Old Swords Reign. I really like both systems. Now, both systems, they're close between price and content and stuff like that. They're very, very close in what they offer. It's mainly the style and mechanics of the game that are slightly different that you may want to look at. So that's going to be up to you. I hope that that helps you decide a little bit. If it did, drop me a comment and let me know. If you'd like to see more comparison between OSR and other games, drop that in the comments, and I'll try to get to those when I can. That's pretty much it for this week. Until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.